Hello and welcome back to my craft room. Fair warning, heads up, if you don't want to be tempted down another rabbit hole, don't watch this video. Look away now, because I've found a new rabbit hole. It might not be new, it's brand new to me. I'd never heard of it before this week, and I had lots of other things I was going to do, but once I saw this I just had to jump in. And that is Bojagi or Pojagi. I'm going to put it on the screen here in case I'm saying it wrong. It's a Korean form of patchwork. So you know I love my kawandi, which and that is a patchworking technique that originated with the Siddhi people in India. So they're African origin, but have been in India for a long time. And I think, you know, I've said before, every culture seems to have its own way of patchworking small pieces of fabric together to and make into new and useful and beautiful things. I've had to go at Manx quilting as well. I love the old fashioned, the old style crazy patchwork, kind of Victorian style English. Of course, America, there's so many beautiful American quilts. Every country and every culture seems to have its version of this. I love what's it called, cantha stitching, sashiko, all of those things that started off as kind of a utilitarian thing, a way of making the most of pieces of fabric and clothing, mending and making do and all of that, and are so beautiful in their own right. I think Pojagi might be another. It's very different. I think the best way, in case you haven't seen it, in case like me this is all new to you, I've just done a quick Google search so I can show you some pictures. So here we go. Here's some look at this, just look at that. It's so light and airy. There seem to be lots of different versions of it. These are kind of more of a modern take on it. So traditionally they're kind of used to wrap things, so wrap gifts, wrap to wrap around household goods, to cover tables and food and things like that. And people have really special Pojagis that are used to wrap really special ceremonial things. And I don't know, here we go, here's another one. I love these. There's lots of different photographs of them hanging up in this with the sun coming through, with the light coming through. So beautiful. But they can be kind of double thick, they can be lined as well, but the main thing seems to be about them being quite light and airy. They're reversible. Look at this, they're reversible, they're all hand stitched, and the idea is that they look the same front and back, and there's a really clever way that they're stitched together. So there it's spelt with a P, sometimes it's spelt with a B. Bojagi. Really simple stitching. It's a clever technique that they use to get this kind of like a flat filled seam effect. Anyway, so I'm desperate to have a go. I'm very much just learning and having a first go at this. Traditionally they use, from what I can work out, lightweight cottons, silks. Of course I've got lots of scraps of silk, lots of small pieces from my bazaar scrap packs, so I'm going to be using my bazaar scrap packs to do this, but I've got lots of other things that would work with it as well. But you can also do it with linen. There's a fabric called, is it called Rami? I think it's called Rami. There's a Korean word for it as well, and that looks, it's quite stiff. It's a natural, completely natural fabric. It looks kind of a little bit like somewhere between linen and silk from what I can see. I'd love to feel it. It looks like it's got a stiffness to it, but it's very light and airy at the same time. I haven't got anything like that, but let me show you what I have got. Oh yeah, and the basic, before I go back to the desk, the basic stitches that I think I need to have are just a running stitch, because there's this kind of pinch stitching technique that they do to make patterns on it. And that's just basically a running stitch really. There's a kind of a whip stitch, an over stitch that they use for most of the joining, and then they do this kind of almost like a flat fell seam technique called, I think it's called Samsol. I'll put it here because because I'm probably saying everything wrong. I've been watching lots and lots of videos. I will try and remember to link to a couple of the channels that I've been looking at. But I mean, if you just Google Pojagi or Bojagi, rabbit hole warning, rabbit hole warning. That's what I say. Let's go to the desk. I'll show you what I'm going to play with. So these are all bits from my Bazaar scrap packs. I'll put a link to Bazaar as well. Most of the fabrics in Bazaar, so they're all reclaimed, rescued fabrics from the textile industry, and they come from India. A lot of cottons, lightweight cottons like this, a lot of silks, a lot of heavier brocades and things like that as well, but that's not what I'm going to be using for this. Now I have dug out all of these kind of pink and red and almost purplish toned pieces here, with a few little bits of greens and aquas in there as well, but mostly it's pink and red tones. And my idea with that is to patch them all together to create one piece of fabric that I can then make into, well, if it goes well, a top. If it doesn't go so well, it might only end up being a scarf. Now, I made a start on this last night when I was all enthused, but I didn't. I should have stopped and looked at the videos for a bit longer, because I realise now that I've done it wrong and I'm going to be having to pick this apart and do it again. But those are the kind of size of pieces I'll probably use, and I think I'm not going to plan a pattern out or anything like that. I'm just going to patch it together as I go. It looks like you can use squares and rectangles, and also triangle shapes people seem to use a lot. There's some curved shapes as well, but I don't think I'm going to attempt that. So I'm going to put these silks to one side. They're all ready for me to go, but I think for my first attempt it would be easier to use cotton. Now, in amongst the Bazaar scrap packs, you get a lot of these very lightweight cottons, and I think these would be perfect. They're so thin. That one's not so much. Is that double thickness? No, that is a bit of a thicker one, but most of them are more like this. They're almost sheer. You can see my hands through that, can't you? So they're not transparent, they're sheer, and the light will shine. I can't really show you obviously, but the light will shine through those beautifully, like some of those pictures we were just looking at. And I've got all these pieces in different shades of pink. And that is where I started doing my recent thrift flip and cut these edges off, but didn't end up using the pieces. So these are actually on the bias, so I'm going to save these to use as bias binding, and that might even be handy to use with whatever I end up making this into. So I'm going to carefully put that to one side so they don't get lost. Now, a lot of these pieces, this one and this one, are just cut straight. But a lot of these pieces are cut on the bias, i.e. the grain of the fabric is running diagonal to the way it's been cut, which means that it's got this give in this direction, which is great for some garments and things, and it's great for bias binding, but actually it's not that useful. I tried using it for that top I was doing a makeover, and it went wrong because it wouldn't hang the same because it's on the bias. So I think I'm gonna cut these into pieces so that the grain is straight again. So I'm gonna end up with some triangles in order to straighten this piece up. You can see the grain is running that way. I think you can see. So in order to straighten it up, at the moment the grain is running that way, I'm going to have to cut there. So I shall cut there, leave a triangle, cut here, and make the kind of most reasonable sized square and rectangle shapes I can. Obviously I'll end up with some triangles as well, and I'm going to piece those together to make the biggest piece of fabric I can. Now, I know that in my stash, have I got it handy? Here we go. I've also got these pieces, and I can't even remember where they came from, but again, they're quite fine. So what I'm kind of thinking is, and there's lots of this is a huge piece. I'm really sorry if you sent this to me and I can't remember, but anyway, point is that there's lots of this, and a lot of those Pojagis are made all of the same colour. And they get large pieces of fabric and cut them up in order to patch them and have that lovely effect. So I'm going to do the same with this, but I'll put pieces of these other colours in between. I really hope, I think that bit's too thick, that's thicker than the rest. I'm going to put that to one side. I want to stick with all of these sheer ones. So you can see that, you know, if you were making a garment, you would see that those are different colours. But if I patch them all together, I think I can make one huge piece of fabric. I might only need to use one of these to make enough for a top. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut all of these up. When I'm ready to start sewing them together, I'm going to come back. I just wanted to record this bit now just to tell you what I'm up to. I'm so excited about this. You know what it's like when you come back up again, when you've suddenly discovered something. Oh, stay to me. When you've suddenly discovered some new craft that you haven't seen before and you haven't tried before, and you can't wait to get in there. I'm like that, and I'm having to really stop myself, watch some of the video tutorials first to make sure I know what I'm doing. And there's that. I think I'm going to love it. I think I'm going to love it. It's another one of those things that you can use scraps. I can use my rescued fabrics. Tiniest little pieces can be worked into it. You can put your own spin on it if I really love it. There's all sorts of, you know, you can get quite elaborate with it, but it can also be quite simple. And it's all hand stitched. The only other thing is, so I'll need needle and thread. The thread is supposed to show, the stitching is supposed to show. So I think I'm going to find some toning pink embroidery threads and just use 2 strands of embroidery thread, I think. I also need, some of them use something like this, like a bone folder kind of thing, to score a line, but you can also use, hang on, I've seen other people using these. You just need something to kind of mark a line in the fabric that then makes it easier to fold over. A straight edge, so I need my little ruler, little pair of scissors, needle, thread. Anyway, right, I'm going to stop recording now and I'll be back in a minute. A couple of hours for me. It's the next day. I was up until the wee small hours last night having a go at this Bojagi, and I absolutely love it. I think if you like hand stitching, I think you're gonna love it too. Have a look. Let me show you where I've got to so far. So I went away, and after I'd filmed that last little bit and cut up or tore up all of those pink fabric, I kept a couple of the bigger pieces and the binding pieces, but I tore up all of these into random, mostly square, some triangular bits. So they're now all, they're not bias cut anymore. They're cut straight now, and I'm just going to patch them together randomly. I'm not going to start with a pattern. Here's where I've got to so far, and I think this was the very first seam that I did, and it worked out really well. You're supposed to be able to see the stitches. I think that's looking pretty good, pretty much how it's supposed to. It should be the same both sides. And what I can't show you is how beautiful this looks when you hold it up to the light, because it's got this sheer airy kind of quality to it. It looks lovely. I'm so pleased with it. I had a bit more of an issue trying to do one of the diagonal joins, but I think it's okay. I can definitely live with it. I've used this kind of pale pink colour all the way through, and I'm wondering if I should have gone for something darker there. So the other things that I've used, I've got various pink stranded cottons, and I've just been using one thickness of the stranded cotton. I thought I'd have to use 2 because, as I say, the stitches are supposed to show, but I think the 1 strand is plenty. I've also got some pins, a little ruler, this not too sharp, it's actually quite rounded at the end of this one, it's lost its sharpness, just something you can use, like I showed you before, one of these kind of paper folder type things, just something that you can make a mark with without actually, into the fabric without actually tearing into it or anything. A little snippy pair of scissors and a bigger pair of fabric scissors, and then I found this old stamping mat. It's got ink and all sorts on it, but it's quite firm. It's like a dense foam. I think you could probably use something like a mouse mat as well. I think it helps have something underneath the fabric that yields a little bit to make the mark with. The other thing I tried was this pinch stitch. How beautiful is that? Well, it's definitely not perfect by a long way, but and I'm loath to iron it flat because I like the way it's kind of sitting like that. I think the idea is that you should do the pinch stitch design before you cut your square shape, because it does kind of shrink the size down. So definitely if you're planning a pattern, you would need to bear that in mind. And when you do the pinch stitch, you pinch it together, you pinch the fabric together like this, and then you either use a tiny running stitch close to the edge, or the little whip stitch again. But I'll show you that in a minute. I'll show you both of them. I'm so loving this. I think what I'm going to do is make strips and join them together. Although I saw one tutorial I quite liked the idea of. So what she was doing was taking a couple of blocks and then and joining them together, then making another strip just a little bit longer. So imagine this is finished here, that took it out to sort of that far, and then another strip down here, so that it gradually kind of almost spiraled out and got bigger and bigger. So I may go that way as well, rather than do it in strips. I think that might look more kind of random. So I might keep this strip and just start doing some smaller pieces now and work them out in that kind of spiral fashion. I don't think that's traditional by any means, but I think it might work for me. So let me just show you how. Just take a couple of these pieces. So you need to match up the lengths. They need to be the same. I could cut one or the other down, it wouldn't really matter. Okay, I'm going to do this and just cut this to fit. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. I'll trim it again in a minute if I need to. So rather than join them together like you would usually think and stitch across there, we're not doing it that way. We're gonna fold the edges in, fold the seam allowances in first rather. What I've started to do is just line the fabric up with the marks on the scoreboard. Definitely eyeball it, and I'm sure as I go along and get more confident I probably will. And I did watch a lot of the Korean ladies were very carefully using rulers or other straight edges and marking the lines. So I'm going to do this first one. I'm going to mark a centimetre seam allowance, and I'm just going to just run this kind of fairly blunt pokey tool along it a couple of times, just so that it makes a crease in the fabric. Just bring you down a little bit. You see that crease in the fabric? So that now makes it easy to turn this under. And I could get my little iron out, my little craft room iron, and press all of these seams as I go, but I'm not finding that I need to bother. Finger pressing seems to be working for me. So I've just turned under a centimetre there. And then on this one I'm going to turn under a bit less than a centimetre, probably half of a centimetre. Not too small, because it needs to be enough to sort of be able to get hold of to turn it under, but about a half a centimetre I guess. Okay, that's my mark there. Turn it under, finger press it again. And now I'm going to put the two pieces together with the seam allowances to the inside, like this. And I'm just going to put some pins in to hold it in place while I stitch. Make sure the edges match up nicely. So this is too long on this side. I'm just going to trim this off now. I'm going to take my needle. Let's go for some of this colour pink this time. I'm not going to have the thread too long, so I don't want it all getting knotty and annoying. And I'm just going to pull out one strand. Thread my needle and tie a knot in one end. And I've got quite a long needle here. I think this might be one of my Sashiko needles. So it's got quite a long eye, so I can get a reasonably thick thread in. I could easily get two strands in if I wanted to, actually. But it's quite narrow, so it's not going to make too big of a hole in the fabric either. So I think this will be good, and it's got a sharp point. And then I'm just going to do a little overstitch to join these two edges together. So I'm going to start here I could bring my knot up from underneath and hide that, but actually all of these are going to get joined together. The knots will get hidden in the seams eventually, so I don't need to worry about it. I'm just going to go back in pretty close to this to start with, and now that's all anchored, I'm going to start my whip stitch, and the idea is to get as close as you can to the edge of the fabric. Oops. And you want it to be, because it's all of this stitching is going to show, you want it to be as uniform as possible. You also don't want to pull these stitches tight, because if you do, it's not going to sit nice and flat when you open the piece out. So I'm only just pulling that thread through. I'm not tugging on it at all. I'm not pulling it sort of firmly through like I kind of usually would, because what you want is for it to open out. So here where I've done, this is the whip stitch that I'm doing now, the overstitch, whatever you want to call it. There's a Korean word for it, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce. Try and get that to focus. Yeah. So this is the seam I'm doing now. I'm doing it now folded up like that. If I did it too tightly, when I opened it out like this, it wouldn't sit flat. Can you see what I mean? I think it's going to take a lot of practice till this is kind of muscle memory to get this consistent. So I want consistent tension. I want it a consistent distance from the edge. That's a little bit of a wobble there, and a consistent distance apart between the stitches as well. I've seen people holding the needles in different ways. Like one lady I was watching, was holding it like this, which I thought was interesting. She was putting her needle through like that. So I might try various ways. And you've just got to go quite slowly and carefully. So it's very mindful. It's also quite tricky doing it at arm's length, so you can see under the camera. So I will just, pulled that on a little bit too tight, I think. Let's just loosen that up. I'll remove the pins as I go along. I'm sort of watching the distance between this stitch and the next one, the last stitch and the next one, just to try and get a consistent stitch all the way along. So I'm going to finish this line of stitching off camera so I can get it under my nose and see what I'm doing. I'll be back in a mo. I've come to the end now, going right up as close as I can get to the end. Put another stitch through there. Oops, it's not focusing at all. Put my needle through the loop to make a little knot and pull it up. Again, I'm not going to worry about the knot because this will all get enclosed when I join it, when I carry on joining. So now when I open this out, it should sit nice and flat, and at this point I could iron it, but I haven't bothered. Fairly happy with that. I mean, it isn't perfect, but it's good enough. So then you turn it over, and the idea now is that because we've got this piece only had the ½ centimetre seam allowance, and this piece has a whole centimetre. Let's get rid of these bits. The idea now is that we're going to do like a kind of flat filled seam where, and this is, I think this is called samsol. I'll put the words here, samsol stitch, this kind of flat filled technique. So you do the whip stitch to join it, then you fold this piece that's longer over the other piece like that. So before I do that, I'm going to score a line again, As I say, I think as time goes on I will probably get less pernickety about doing this. I'll probably just finger press it, being me. I'll get sloppy, but at the moment I'm quite enjoying the process of doing it this way. And you can see that's made a crease right through all of those layers of fabric actually. So now I can easily fold that layer over the top like that, finger press it down, and then turn it over like that, hoping I'm going to be able to, when I edit this, I'll be able to zoom in on that a bit, get rid of these wispy bits. I tore the fabric so they would go straight, but actually probably not such a good idea because you end up with all the wispy bits. So now I've folded that flat like that. Now I want to seam it here, but what I did wrong when I did it the first time was a running stitch along here. That's not right. It needs to be another whip stitch so that it looks just the same as it does on the other side. So now what we need to do is fold this up like that and do a whip stitch. And I could just finger press that, but at the moment I'm still being pernickety and doing the scoring. So I'm going to follow that line along there, press this. Probably should have done that from the other side because now I've got my score going in the wrong direction. But it's okay, it will still fold there, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to fold along that line. There we go, let's just show you what I'm doing. So I've folded the longer seam allowance over the shorter seam allowance, folded the whole thing over like that. I now want to flatten this down by whip stitching it to this piece. So pins again. Definitely works better to put the pins in long ways like this, otherwise it all kind of distorts. And I think especially when I come to do the silk piece, it's going to be less likely to slip around with the pins in this way. This is the kind of technique you can't do in a hurry, but that's part of the joy of it. So there we go. I'm now going to overstitch in the same way all along here. So I don't need to show you that. It's exactly the same as I did last time. I'll be back when I'm ready, when I finish that. Here we go. I've finished doing that little seam. So now when I open it out, I can press it flat and it looks the same-ish both sides. I need some practice with I definitely need to practice my consistency, but looking at some of the examples I've seen online, I'm not far off. Maybe take some pieces like this. I'd need to get another piece that will fit there. I might need to cut another piece and then carry on working it around, so eventually, oops, sorry, the wobbles, you'd end up, yeah, if that kind of makes sense. So I think that's what I'm gonna do, and just randomly put the colours together. I think my main rule is just going to be don't put the same colour next to each other, but actually the ones that are all made out of all the same colour, just lots of pieces of all the same colour, looks so beautiful. So yeah, there will be a lot more of the paler pink because I've got lots of that, so I need to remember to spread these other bright pinks and deeper pinks around a bit. So I'm going to go on with that, and I just thought I'd just show you a little bit of this pinch technique, pinch stitch, which I've forgotten the Korean name for and probably couldn't say properly anyway. So with this, I'll just do a little bit of it to show you. I've seen all kinds of patterns, quite intricate patterns, some of them done with this. So I've got that line in my fabric. I just finger press that again, single thread again, single strand rather. So that's, I think you want something a bit thicker than a sewing machine thread. Oh. And I guess you could make it, you could use like a fine like perlé cotton, I don't know, kind of like sashiko thread kind of weight would be nice. I've got a lot of this in lots of lovely colours, so I'm going to go with this. Tied my knot. I'm going to have a look at some of the other patterns you can do with this pinch stitch and just have a bit of an experiment. Just do a few pieces like this interspersed around my piece. As bearing in mind that if I get on with this well enough that I can do a big piece relatively quickly, I fancy making a top with it. Lovely cool wafty top that I could put over a little t-shirt maybe. So I'm just going to do a little line of running stitch here. So I'll start with a knot at the end. As always, I'm just going to do an extra stitch just to secure it. I have to cut those ends off. That's because I tore the fabric. I don't think that's a good idea. Won't do that again, but I've torn it all up now. So now I'm just going to do some really, really small, neat, as regular as I can manage running stitches. And this lovely long sashiko type needle is perfect for this because I can take lots of stitches at the same time. I think with practice I will get a lot quicker at this. So I'll just pull that out. There we go. And again, it should look the same on both sides. So I'm going to run along, all the way along this, and then I'm going to open it out and fold the fabric in the opposite direction and do the same, and stitch along that as well. When I've done that, I'll be back. I've stitched those lines in both directions now. So to get these kind of leaf shapes, and that's the only thing I've tried so far, I think you can create yourself a template so they're regular, but I didn't bother. I just kind of eyeballed it. I think you could put any shapes in here. I thought it was quite fun to have some curved in. So I have just been doing this, just eyeballing. I've just realised though I've done it in the wrong direction. I should have done it from the other side. Let's just go over that again. You're just drawing a line in the fabric really, and I guess you could probably use a heat erasable pen or something first to draw your shape out, and then you can just finger press the shape to make sure that's really set, and again just run a little line of running stitch along it in just the same way. I think that you can also do it with the kind of overstitch, the sort of whip stitch. So I'm going to try that this time just to see what that looks like. So this whole thing is all just done with a little overcast or whip stitch and a running stitch. There's nothing more complicated than that, which is lovely. So I'm going to try this one with the whip stitch in and see which I like best. I'll probably start at one edge so I can hide the knot there, work round here, draw the next leaf and work back out to there so I can finish there again. So I need to know I've got enough on my needle to do that in one go, because I don't want an end to have to get rid of here. I don't know if I showed you what the other side looks like with this. An interesting effect. I don't think you're then meant to fold it over and stitch like that. I think that's it. But really, I love the. I might iron one just to see what it looks like, but I really like the way that sort of. I wouldn't want to lose that kind of curve, that three-dimensional quality. So yeah, I'm going to leave it like that, I think. So yeah, let's try this with a whip stitch instead. Start with my knot at the edge again and just do that one little anchoring stitch. Run a line of whip stitch just as close to the edge as I can get. I'm trying to just pick up a couple of threads of the fabric, and I'm trying to keep them an even distance apart again. And there's a couple of other interesting techniques I've seen that I want to try, but I'll do that in my next video, because I don't want this to go on too long. So I've taken a couple of stitches there, and now I know I'm going into the curve, so I'm just going to readjust my hold on it. Make sure I'm still following that shape. It doesn't have to open out flat this time, so I can afford to pull it a little more firmly, I guess. I think I'm going to like the running stitch best, but it's got to be worth checking, and maybe a combination would be nice. I'm sure I could even do my own thing with it and use other edging stitches on this as well. It wouldn't be authentic, but I'm probably not being authentic anyway. I watched a lovely video of a group of Korean ladies sitting together making their Pojagi, and just the same way that I sit together with my friends stitching. It's the same the world over. Such beautiful work they were doing, chattering away as they worked, like we all do. So there we go, I've come into the middle now, so I'm going to just finish that line there, but leave my needle threaded up, ready for the next one. Now actually, I think I prefer the look of that. Maybe a mixture of the two is nice. Maybe it's nice to have the cross pieces with the running stitch and then the whip stitch for the leaf shape. So I'll probably carry on and do the rest of that one with the whip stitch and see what I think, but it gives a more definite line. But that's partly because I've used a darker thread as well, and I think traditionally they do the white ones with red stitching because it brings good luck, I think it was, and yellow is also used. Also a good colour. So, but I've got all these lovely, but I think this is going to look lovely in these pinks, and I use all these different shades of the threads. So I'm going to carry on working on this evening. I'm itching to sit down and carry on sewing, and I'm going to finish this video here, and I'll come back and show you how I'm getting on in a few days. I feel all calm and chilled just from doing that. It's very I think there's lots of my slow stitching friends out there are gonna love this as well. If you've not seen it before, let me know. Have you tried it? Have you seen it before? I couldn't believe it's something. It's obviously goes way back, and I'd never heard of it before. And it's always lovely to discover a new technique like this. I definitely needed a new hobby. Okay, I'm going to go now and carry on doing a bit of stitching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will be back in a few days to show you how I'm getting on. Thanks very much for joining me today, and I'll see you again really soon.